That was a Monday. A Thursday night the parson come, and bless me, the fright the old woman was in, and wiping the chair and nudging and winking. "Is Thomas there?" he says. "Can I see him?" So I got up and out at the door, and I put a knot on my heart like one of you when he takes a turn and belays and howls on till it breaks. "And, well," I says. Then he looked at me. "And have you your pipe, Thomas?" says he. "Maybe you'd better light it," he said. "It's terrible good for Studdy the head." And he wouldn't take rest till I had it lit. And he twists and "Wait a bit," he says. And he feels, and "We're all alone," says he, "and behold ye a pipe of his own. And I'll smoke too," he says. And he charges and puffs away like bornages. I never knew the like was at him afore. And so we walked along the shore. And if he didn't behove to spin a yarn about the stars and Aldebaran and Orion, and just to consider the grand way God had put them together. And wasn't it a good world after all? And what was a man, and the Bible and Paul, till I got quite mad, and I says, "That'll do. Were you at the brew, parson? Were you at the brew?" Then it all come out. And the jaw old Anthony had, and the courts and the law, and Jane McGeehan and mother both. He'd gone there twice, but she'd stuck to her oath. And what could he do? "I'm going," says I. "Keep your heart up now." I'll try. "Good night, and mind you go straight to bed. God bless you, Tom." "And you, sir," I said. "Come up in the morning." Good night. "Now mind you come." All right. And it's into the house, and "Mother," says I, "I'm off." "What off?" says she, "if you please." "Off." "What off?" says she. "You slink." And she was sharpening a knife upon the sink. And she flung it down, and she looked that way, straight and stiff, and "What did you say?" Off where?" And the sting of a light snapped quick in her eye. All right, I says, and away to the Chiss I goes. "Stand by," I cried, "I want my clothes." And I hauled them out. Oh, she gave a leap. "And leave them alone," she says, "you creep." And she scutched them up, and she whisked about as lithe as an eel, and still looking out over her shoulder, and eyeing me like a flint or some dead thing. "Let be, mother," I says. "Let go, you'd better." Then she didn't begin no matter, and she threw things upon the floor, and she stamped them and down on her knees, and she tore and ripped and ragged and scrunched away. Oh, hands and teeth, I'll be bound to say them shirts was 18p a yard. Real good shirts. The woman was hard. Hard she was, and lusty and strong. I've heard them say when she was young she could lift 100 weight and more, and there wasn't a man in the parish could throw her. And as for shearing and picking potatoes, well, she bet it all, and always as neat as a pin, and taking a pride in it. For there's some old women, they're hardly fit. They're all that dirty and stupid and messing and muddling. I wouldn't live with the like. No, I wouldn't. But Yandhar woman, asleep or awake, was a clay old crather and no mistake. But hard, hard. For the old man died, and she looked, but she never cried. And him laid out as sweet as bran, and everything white like a gentleman. And brass nails, bless ye, and none of your stirrets, but proud in herself and sarving the spirits. And Mistress Baines now, was he prepared? God knows, says she. The woman was hard. But if you could have prized the hatches off that strong soul, you would have seen the catches she made at her heart, choked up to the brim, and you'd have knew she was as dead as him. But mind me, from that day the juice of her life, as you may say, was clean dried out of her, and she got as tough and as dry and as hard as a knot, hard but handy, and going still but troubling much for good or ill. Like the moon and the stars God only touched once long ago, and away they scutched, and now he never minds them a bit. But they keep going on, for they're used of it. Going on? Well, she did go on that night, and up from the floor and her back to the light of the fire. It was burning middle and low, and the candle capsized, and she looked to grow that big in the dark, and never a breath, but standing there like the shadow of death. Never a breath for maybe a minute, just like a cloud with thunder in it. Dark and still till its powder bags burst, and the world is blown to rags. She gave it them with a taste, she did. And was it that flippity-flappity flid of a Betsy Lee? And she knew well enough what I'd come to at last with my milking and stuff, and sniffing about where I hadn't no call, and the lines hanging rotten upon the wall, and the boat never moored and grinding her bones to sawdust upon the cobbling stones, and the people tacking, and who were the Lees? Who were they now, after all, if you please? Who were they to cock their noses? And Lee's old wife with her strings and her bows, and her streamers and trimmings and pippin' and poppin', her stupid old head like a hen with a toppin'. And had they forgot when they lived next door? The lazy lot, and as poor, and Mrs. Baines, the beautiful tay you've got, and I really think I'll stay, and could you lend me a shilling till tomorrow, and borrow. Aye, and starving, and him doing nothing for hours, but poking about with his barbs and his flowers. The liggy-mithray, the dirty old bow. And now it was Mistress Lee, my go. Misther and Mistress Lee in the gig. Make way, good people, terrible big. And would I demean myself to them? You silly Billy, for shame, for shame. And at it again. And what she would rather, and me the very spit of my father. And what was the matter with Ginny McGee? Your wife, and why shouldn't she be? She was good at the work, and worth 100 of your Betsy things. And why shouldn't we be sundered? And Ginny and her would agree, never fear her. She was despard, though to hear her. Hush, mother, I says. Oh, mother, hush. And she turned to the fire, and I saw her brush the tears from her eyes, and I saw the working of her back and her body jerking, and I went, and I never said nothing lick, but I put my arm around her neck, and I looked in her face, the shape and the strength, and the very face itself had went, all into one, like a sudden thaw, slished and slushed, or the way you've saw the water bubbling and swirling around the place where a strong man have gone down. And I took her and put her upon the bed, like a little child, and her poor old head on my breast, and I hushed her, and stroked her cheek, talking little talk, the way they speak to babies, I did. And then I begun to think of yonder Absalom, and David crying, my son, and the moon come round, and the light shone in, and crept on her face, and I saw the thin she was, and the war in her neck all dried and shrivelled up like strips of hide. And I thought of the time it was as warm and as soft as Betsy's, and her husband's arm round it, strong and loving, and me a cuddling up and sucking free. And I cried like Peter in the Testament, when Jesus looked at him, and out he went and cried like a fool, and the cock a crowing. But what there was in his heart there's no knowing. And I swore by the living God above I'd pay her back, and love for love, and keep for keep, and wages checked, and her with a note, and all correct. So I kissed her, and she never stirred. And I took my clothes, and without a word I sticked the door, and by break of day I was standing alone on Douglas Quay.